Thank you very much. A quick word about Grant Thornton before I kind of get into the talk. Just so you know what sort of organisation we are. We're part of a global organisation of advisory, tax and audit firms. In the UK, we work with large corporates, with banks particularly, around corporate renewal, remediation in financial services. We work with dynamic, smaller and particularly mid-market businesses in the UK. And we work with local authorities, public sector, and also not-for-profit. So we kind of work on an advisory basis across the UK, I suppose, sort of infrastructure. And in the UK, we employ about 4,500 people. My role is thinking about public policy issues at Grant Thornton. So as Head of Public Affairs, I advise our board on political change. I advise our clients around that. At the moment, Brexit probably takes about 70% of my time. And talking about business with purpose and social value and thinking about that is the, I suppose, what sort of rejuvenates my spirit. And actually thinking about the longer term of how do we make post-Brexit Britain a more inclusive society. And I guess that's part of my role, is identifying societal challenges that we as a firm can play a part in helping to address. So I work for a private sector company. I used to work for government. I work with Dan Corey, one of our speakers later. I'm on the board of a charity and a social enterprise. So I sort of hope that makes me slightly sector neutral and I don't come at it from just a private sector point of view. So you're probably thinking, why is a sort of city-based lobbyist talking about social value? And I thought if I sort of just shared partly my personal journey and that of Grant Thornton as a way of showing why social value should be at the core of our economy and society, and that includes businesses. So a year after I joined Grant Thornton, 2015, our 200 partners, led by our CEO, Sasha, decided to adopt a clear purpose to shape a vibrant economy. That was a conscious statement by the firm. It means that's our reason for being. It's why people come into work. And that's therefore not to make money, it is to shape a vibrant economy. We remain a for-profit business, but our belief is that profit with a purpose leads to a more sustainable business. So for us, that's good business sense. Working across the economy, we're seeing kind of tremendous disruption and change, demographics, technology. And for our own sector, that means that we can see change ahead. We can see that we will be disrupted ourselves. And therefore, actually, part of this, addressing society's wider challenges, makes us more relevant to our clients, makes us see that in the long term, we will be mitigating against future risks. We will be identifying, if you like, kind of market failures and areas to work with clients on. And crucially, as a business that is made up of our people and depends on the talent that we can attract, this is a really fundamental part of, if you like, sort of attracting that global talent, being an organisation that particularly millennials and others, people who are looking for more than just earning a daily crust, want to come and work for. So it's also part of our talent strategy. At this point, I was going to just briefly introduce the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I was a bit late to the game around these. It was a few years ago that my boss at Grant Thornton introduced them to me, but they kind of underpin a lot of what I'm going to talk about. In terms of us as a firm, they're quite relevant to some of the work we do on social mobility, expanding apprenticeships as an example, particularly for school leavers, work we do around promoting diversity inclusion in our workforce. And also then looking at some of the SDGs around economic development, local growth. In 2016, we went on a series of conversations around the country, looking at different cities to discuss cross-sector what would make a vibrant local economy. And particularly focused on what actions might come out of that. So we're quite proud that, for example, in Reading, the Ethical Reading initiative, a social enterprise to encourage organisations and their employees to make more ethical choices, that kind of came out of the conversation that we convened. Around 2016, I was involved in a project to look at defining what we mean by a vibrant economy. So for a firm of accountants, and as someone who's not an accountant, I have to remind myself every day that I work with a lot of accountants, and they like to count things, and they like things to be tangible and measurable, not sort of broad, loose concepts. And therefore, actually, it was really important that we defined what we meant by a vibrant economy and that we could measure it. We took the UN SDGs and said, okay, how can we kind of package this and break this down in a way that might work for particularly local communities? And I think, again, maybe as a sort of politico, someone with an American wife as well, I was also really inspired by the Robert Kennedy speech from 1968, where he declared that GDP measures everything except that which makes life worthwhile. So that actually became part of our, I suppose, mission statement of how do we start to describe a measure of societal progress that moves us away from GDP. The result was our Vibrant Economy Index. We look at kind of 6 baskets that you've got there, but picking out things like community, trust and belonging, inclusion and equality, saying those are as important as prosperity and kind of a dynamic economy. And actually what we found is we took that, maybe it was led by public policy rationale, but actually we're now taking that to clients, not just local authorities, to help them think about their strategies for growth, but actually also private sector businesses who want to think about their local economy and the priorities in their local area. So we'd sort of taken the SDGs, we'd applied them to place. So our next stop was thinking about large corporates and thinking about ourselves. And again, around the same time, we started talking to an organisation called Future Fit Business Benchmark, which takes the SDGs and applies them to larger businesses. So actually they take 17 SDGs and turn them into 23 comparable, measurable goals for any large corporate that wants to be truly sustainable. And enables organisations to measure their current status, identify priorities, develop actionable plans. Again, as accountants, we loved the fact that this was measurable, and crucially, it was an approach we could not only apply to ourselves to measure our progress, but also it has the potential to be a tool for investors, including kind of me and you with our pensions, to assess the impact of our investments. We can see the long-term aim, whether it's this particular tool or the concept of being able to measure in a comparable way the impact of any organisation, enabling investors to take informed decisions about, if you like, their portfolio. We signed up to this, joined organisations like Body Shop, Novo Nordisk, and we're their assurance partner, so we're working with Future Fit to develop a methodology for third-party assurance. And I guess that's kind of, it's an obvious role for us to play, but actually it's a crucial part of the infrastructure of making measurement of impact become part of the norm, become part of the business framework. So we've looked at kind of local communities, we've looked at large corporates. In the last year, we sort of then realised there was also an appetite amongst smaller organisations to develop some sort of tool that enables them to think about purpose, develop a strategy and an action plan around social and environmental impact, and to signpost them to further help. So we're conscious there's loads of organisations that are doing brilliant things, brilliant models of its Blueprint for Better Business, the B Corp. There are lots of places that firms can go to help. For the smaller, actually the start of the conversation, the start of the journey is often the hardest thing to work out where they should focus, what it means, and where they might go to develop their methodology. So we're sort of developing this concept of kind of a charter for good growth. It's work in progress. This is a working draft, so don't take any of these words as fixed, and we're going around talking to stakeholders and other organisations to refine it. But you see at the core of it is, I suppose we've boiled the SDGs down to 5 Ps of purpose, long-term profits, people and being a good employer, place and being part of the local community and helping to develop that, and planet, being a steward of resources. And then when you translate into what it might look like, some of this is aspirational and directional, some of it's very specific, so thinking about living wage, thinking about apprenticeships, and I think some of that then starts to translate into some of the things we maybe see in social value contracts. And I guess that then takes us to thinking about applying social value and impact in supply chain, not just public sector procurement, but actually private sector procurement. So for us, we're talking to a number of large corporates who are looking at how to apply social value in their supply chain and their procurement. We're looking at that as our own organisation. Now, it's quite early days for us, so the example there is kind of quite a small first step, but it means switching our canteen coffee supplier to Change Please, which is a social enterprise that works with the homeless, pays the London living wage, and then supplies support around housing, bank accounts, and mental well-being. I think the other thing that I've really noticed is in becoming a London living wage employer, actually that's a great way of starting to drive social value for your supply chain, because you've then got to look at all of your contractors within that area, ensuring that they are paying the living wage. So I think that's an area for further development. I think there's a real appetite amongst large businesses to do more. So I guess in all of this, what I've gradually realised, as I say, it's a bit about my personal journey, is that the concept of social value joins everything up. And during the election last year, we had a round table of finance directors of businesses to discuss government proposals on corporate governance. And this was kind of in response to thinking about how the government might tighten up corporate governance, company reporting. But one of the finance directors said, corporate governance codes are the wrong lever to achieve change in business behaviour. And he went on to say that government could achieve much more significant change in corporate behaviours if they applied the Social Value Act to all central government procurement. So we kind of adopted this, put it into a manifesto that we put out at the time and that we then took to government. That was then, I suppose, reinforced by our work with the UK National Advisory Board on Impact Investing, which was set up by the G8, published this report, Rise of Impact, last year, which is looking at how we achieve systemic change by incorporating social and environmental impact into financial services, into investment, business with purpose and public procurement. And we worked a lot with Hazel Blears on the working group on social value and public procurement, which came up with a proposal of all central government and local government making every tender decision have a minimum weighting of 20% on social value. And I think, crucially, that 20% figure came out of conversations they had with procurement experts, that it was the critical level at which social value is strongly considered by suppliers in their tender submission. So that's the level at which the supplier starts to really consider it, and therefore we start to activate change in the wider economy. So that's something that we are calling for with central government. And I suppose that sort of takes to the latest and most recent chapter. Since the beginning of the year, there's been a lot of debate in the light of Carillion's collapse about public trust in business and the role of private firms in delivering public services. Some of that debate tends to be a kind of public sector good, private sector bad, or indeed vice versa. Someone who's worked in both sectors, I kind of have real difficulty recognising those pictures, and it also tends to ignore the role of not-for-profit, of social enterprise in delivering public services. So we think that in response to this debate, government has a real opportunity to take a different approach. As the single largest buyer of goods and services in the UK economy, the UK government has kind of unmatched potential to use its procurement to incentivise responsible long-term business decision-making. So moving to that 20% social value weighting in all contracts could make a massive difference. And that's not just about delivering public services, and that's not just about developing trust in how public services are delivered. But if you think about the ripple effect that would have through large sections of the economy, it would motivate suppliers to create positive social, economic, environmental impacts, creates commercial opportunities for organisations in any sector that deliver this type of value. And it also means that investors would adjust their preferences. You would start to see a change in behaviour as they think about putting their money behind those organisations that can actually match the social value requirements. I think the other thing is that it's really interesting to see there's cross-party support for this. So the Centre for Social Justice and the Society of Conservative Lawyers is calling for this as much as the left. More broadly, I think the move to develop more long-term, responsible capitalism and a better way of doing business has widespread support in the business community. I'm always conscious that it's not just a conversation that a few of us have in our office. The more we start talking to our clients about it, actually they really get excited about it. You know, there is a movement in business around this, and there's a movement in the investor community. More and more we're talking to asset managers, banks and others about how they can apply this to their portfolios. So I sort of hope that in a nutshell, and recognising that this is speaking as a kind of someone new to this debate potentially over the last couple of years, but I hope it illustrates why social value should be core to our businesses, our public procurement and our economy. We can't compartmentalise business as separate from society. You know, if you like, the separation of these has partly contributed to the collapse of public trust in established institutions. I think Bill gave brilliant examples of how every organisation needs to collaborate across sector and think about their role in society, not just their sort of very narrowly defined role. As we face even greater societal change, including transformation of jobs by technology, ageing population, climate change, and a time when public finances remain weak, actually the way of rising to some of these challenges is working together for the same goals, working across sector, and achieving wider social value as part of the core activities of all of our organisations. So they become part of what we do, not an add-on. It's not CSR, it's part of what we do. And there I think social value becomes an essential for managing long-term risk, meeting investor, customer and employee expectations, delivering sustainable public services and achieving sustainable profits. Thank you. I look forward to discussing.